The rattling of iron keys against steel bars jolted Zara Galloway awake, her chestnut hair falling in tangled waves over her face as she pushed herself up from the hard wooden bench that had served as her bed for the past 3 nights. Dodge City, Kansas, 1878, was unforgiving to those who spoke their minds, especially women who dared challenge a corrupt mayor. "Rise and shine, Miss Galloway," Sheriff Thompson called, his voice gruff yet tinged with a hint of sympathy. "You've got a visitor." Zara's throat was dry, her once pristine blue dress now stained with dirt from the cell floor. She'd been arrested for disturbing the peace after publicly questioning Mayor Simmons about missing town funds during the Founders' Day celebration. The real disturbance had been to the mayor's reputation, but in Dodge City, that was enough to land a woman behind bars. The sheriff stepped aside, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the morning light streaming through the jailhouse windows. Zara squinted, making out the shape of a wide-brimmed hat and broad shoulders draped in a leather vest. "This is Isaac Zimmerman," Sheriff Thompson said, gesturing to the stranger, "new rancher from the North Ridge." Isaac Zimmerman stepped forward, and Zara could finally see him clearly. Sun-baked skin stretched over sharp cheekbones, with eyes the color of prairie grass after rain. A thin scar ran along his jaw, disappearing into the light stubble that covered his chin. He couldn't have been more than 30, but his eyes held the weathered look of a man who'd seen his share of hardship. "Madam," Isaac said, removing his hat and nodding toward her. His voice was deep but gentle, like distant thunder that promised rain without threat. "What does he want?" Zara asked the sheriff, not bothering to hide her suspicion. Strange men rarely brought good news to imprisoned women. Sheriff Thompson jingled his keys. "He's paid your bail. Mayor set it at $50, thinking nobody would pay it." The sheriff chuckled. "Guess he didn't count on Mr. Zimmerman here." Zara stood up straighter, pride warring with relief. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Isaac Zimmerman's mouth quirked upwards slightly. "I was at the Founders' Day gathering, heard what you said about the missing school funds. Figured anyone willing to stand up to Simmons deserves better than his jail cell." The sheriff unlocked the cell door, swinging it open with a creak that echoed through the small jailhouse. "You're free to go, Miss Galloway, but the mayor made it clear you're not welcome at the boarding house anymore." Zara's heart sank. Mrs. Winter's boarding house had been her home since arriving in Dodge City 6 months ago to take the schoolteacher position. Where would she go now? As if reading her thoughts, Isaac cleared his throat. "She's free to stay with me." Both Zara and the sheriff stared at him. "That wouldn't be proper," Sheriff Thompson said, though without much conviction. "I've got a small cabin on my property," Isaac continued. "Used to belong to the former rancher's mother. It's empty now. Miss Galloway can stay there until she finds more suitable arrangements." Zara studied him carefully. His offer seemed genuine, but she'd learned the hard way that men rarely gave without expecting something in return. "And what would you want in exchange, Mr. Zimmerman?" Isaac met her gaze directly. "Just help with teaching my ranch hands children. Got 5 families working for me, and the little ones can't make the trip to town every day for schooling." Sheriff Thompson shrugged. "It's a fair offer, Miss Galloway, better than sleeping in the stables." Zara stepped out of the cell, feeling strangely exposed now that the bars no longer separated her from the world. "I'll accept your offer, Mr. Zimmerman, but only temporarily." Isaac nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "Understood. My wagon's outside whenever you're ready." 20 minutes later, after collecting her meager belongings from the boarding house under Mrs. Winter's disapproving stare, Zara found herself perched beside Isaac on a wagon seat, heading north out of Dodge City. The spring air was crisp, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. They rode in silence for the first mile, the rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves filling the space between them. "Thank you," Zara finally said, her voice almost lost in the breeze. "Not many would have done what you did." Isaac kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "Not many would have done what you did either. Standing up to Mayor Simmons takes courage, or foolishness," Zara sighed. "I've likely lost my teaching position as well as my lodgings." "The town needs a good teacher more than it needs Simmons," Isaac replied. And from what I hear, you're the best teacher Dodge City's had in years. Zara felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. You seem to know a lot about me, Mr. Zimmerman. Isaac, he corrected. And a man who doesn't gather information before making decisions doesn't last long out here. The wagon crested a hill, revealing a sprawling ranch nestled in a verdant valley. A large main house stood proudly at the center, with several smaller buildings scattered around it. To the east, cattle grazed peacefully on rolling grassland. Welcome to Whispering Pine Ranch, Isaac said, a note of pride in his voice. Bought it 3 months ago from Old Man Harrington when his arthritis got too bad for ranching. It's beautiful, Zara admitted, taking in the peaceful scene. In the distance, she could see children playing near one of the smaller houses, their laughter carried on the wind. Isaac guided the wagon toward a small cabin set apart from the other buildings, nestled beneath a stand of cottonwood trees. It was simple but well-maintained, with a small porch and freshly painted shutters. This will be your place, he said, bringing the wagon to a halt. It's not much, but it's clean and private. Zara's eyes widened as she took in the cabin. She'd expected a shack, not this charming dwelling that looked more inviting than her room at the boarding house had ever been. It's more than generous, she said softly. I don't know how to thank you. Isaac jumped down from the wagon and offered her his hand. You can thank me by teaching those children. Most of my hands came with me from Colorado. Good families who deserve better than what they left behind. Zara hesitated before placing her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, strong yet careful as he helped her down from the wagon. For a moment they stood close, and Zara noticed flecks of gold in his green eyes. I'll show you around, he said, stepping back and breaking the moment. The cabin has everything you should need, but if there's anything missing, just let me know. The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a small bedroom off to one side. Someone had placed fresh wildflowers in a jar on the table and stocked the pantry with basic provisions. My foreman's wife, Martha, prepared it this morning when I rode into town, Isaac explained, watching as Zara explored her new home. She'll be by later to check on you. Thought you might appreciate a woman's company after. He trailed off, but Zara knew he meant after her time in jail. That's very thoughtful, she said, running her fingers along the smooth wooden table. When would you like me to start teaching? Tomorrow's Sunday, so Monday would be fine, Isaac replied. There's an old storehouse we've cleaned out that can serve as a schoolroom. It's just behind the main house. Zara nodded, already mentally cataloging what she would need. How many children? 7 between the ages of 5 and 12. He shifted his weight, suddenly looking less sure of himself. I hope this arrangement works for you, Miss Galloway. I know it's not what you're used to. Zara looked around the cabin that was now her sanctuary, then back at the man who had rescued her from both jail and homelessness, asking only that she do what she loved most in return. Please call me Zara, she said, offering him a genuine smile for the first time. And I think this arrangement might work very well indeed. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity as Zara established her new classroom and met the families of Whispering Pine Ranch. Martha Jenkins, the foreman's wife, became a fast friend, helping Zara settle in and introducing her to the other women on the ranch. The children were eager to learn, making her first week of teaching fly by. Isaac kept his distance, occupied with ranch work from dawn until dusk, but Zara often felt his eyes on her when their paths crossed. She found herself watching for him too, admiring the way he worked alongside his men rather than above them, the respect they showed him earned rather than demanded. On Friday evening, a knock at her cabin door startled Zara from her lesson planning. She opened it to find Isaac standing on her porch, hat in hand. Evening, he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Thought you might like to join me for supper at the main house. To celebrate your first week. Zara hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'd like that. Let me just get my shawl. The main house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, with high ceilings and spacious rooms filled with sturdy, practical furniture. In the dining room, the table was set for 2 with candles already lit. Did you cook? Zara asked, surprised. Isaac's laugh was rich and warm. Lord, no, I'd poison us both, Martha left everything ready before heading home. They sat across from each other, the candlelight casting soft shadows across the table. Isaac served them both generous portions of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. "The children are making remarkable progress," Zara said as they ate. "Tommy Jenkins has a real gift for mathematics." Isaac nodded. "His father says he helps with the accounts already. Smart kid." He paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "The parents are grateful. They'd been worried their children would grow up without proper schooling." "And what about you, Isaac?" Zara asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "What brought you to Kansas from Colorado?" Something flickered across his face, a shadow of old pain. "Needed a fresh start. My father died last year, left me his savings. He always talked about having a big spread in Kansas, so here I am, living his dream." "I'm sorry about your father," Zara said softly. Isaac shrugged. "He had a good life. What about your family?" Zara looked down at her plate. "My parents died of fever when I was 16. I lived with my aunt in St. Louis until I got my teaching certificate. Dodge City was the first place that offered me a position. And now the mayor's trying to take that away from you," Isaac said, his voice hardening. "It's not right." "Life rarely is," Zara replied with a sad smile. "But I'm grateful for your kindness. Not many would have done what you did." Isaac met her gaze across the flickering candlelight. "I think you'll find I'm not like many men, Zara." Something in his voice sent a shiver down her spine, not of fear, but of something far more dangerous, hope. As weeks turned into months, Zara found herself settling into life at Whispering Pine Ranch. The cabin became her home, decorated with wildflowers and the children's drawings. She started a small garden behind it, growing herbs and vegetables with seeds Martha had given her. Summer arrived in a blaze of heat and color, turning the prairie into a sea of wildflowers. Zara and Isaac fell into a comfortable routine, sharing supper twice a week and discussing everything from books to politics to the ranch's operations. She found herself looking forward to those evenings, to the sound of his laughter and the thoughtful way he considered her opinions. One scorching July afternoon, Zara dismissed her students early and decided to cool off in the small creek that ran through the eastern edge of the ranch property. She found a secluded spot shaded by willows, removed her shoes and stockings, and dangled her feet in the cool water, sighing with relief. "Didn't mean to intrude," came Isaac's voice from behind her, Zara startled, nearly slipping off the rock where she sat. "Isaac, I didn't hear you approach." He stood at the edge of the willow's shade, his shirt sleeves rolled up and collar open against the heat. "I come here sometimes when the day gets too hot, best spot on the ranch for cooling off." "I can leave if you know," he said quickly. "Please stay, it's your creek as much as mine." Zara smiled at that. "I don't recall creek ownership being part of our arrangement." Isaac chuckled and moved to sit on a neighboring rock, removing his boots to join her in cooling his feet. "Consider it an amendment to our original agreement." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the gurgle of the creek and the chorus of cicadas in the trees. "I got a letter from Sheriff Thompson today," Isaac finally said. "Mayor Simmons is being investigated by the state for embezzlement. Seems someone finally paid attention to what you were saying that day." Zara's head whipped around to face him. "Truly," Isaac nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Truly. And the town council wants to formally apologize to you. They're offering your teaching position back for the fall term." A complicated mix of emotions washed over Zara: vindication, relief, but also an unexpected pang at the thought of leaving Whispering Pine Ranch, leaving Isaac. "That's wonderful news," she said, her voice not quite matching her words. Isaac studied her face. "Is it? You don't sound certain." Zara looked down at the water swirling around her ankles. "Of course it is. It's what I wanted to be vindicated, to have my position back." "But," Isaac prompted gently. "But I've grown fond of teaching here," she admitted. "Of the children, the families, the quiet mornings and beautiful sunsets." She couldn't bring herself to say what she truly meant. "I've grown fond of you." Isaac was silent for so long that Zara finally looked up. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Stay," he said simply, one word filled with more meaning than Zara dared interpret. "The children will be starting town school in the fall," she reminded him. You won't need a teacher anymore. I'm not asking you to stay as a teacher, Isaac said, his voice low. He reached across the space between them, his hand covering hers. I'm asking you to stay because the thought of you leaving makes this ranch feel empty despite all the people on it. Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. Isaac, I know it's sudden, he continued, maybe even improper, but these past months getting to know you, seeing your strength and kindness, I find myself thinking about you from sunrise to sunset and then dreaming about you until dawn. Zara stared at him, speechless. She'd never expected this, not from a man like Isaac, who could surely have any woman he wanted, yet the sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. You don't have to answer now, he said, misinterpreting her silence. I just wanted you to know that you have a choice. You can return to Dodge City with your head held high, or you can stay here with me and see where this leads. Zara took a deep breath, gathering her courage. What if I want both? Isaac's brow furrowed in confusion. What if I teach in town during the day but come home to the ranch? To you. Each evening, she clarified, her cheeks flushing with the boldness of her words. Understanding dawned on Isaac's face, followed by a smile that rivaled the summer sun for brightness. Zara Galloway, are you proposing an arrangement between us? Perhaps I am, she replied, feeling braver by the second. Though some might say that's your role. In one fluid motion, Isaac slid from his rock to kneel before her, water soaking the knees of his trousers. Then I'll gladly take that role. He took both her hands in his. Zara, these past months have shown me what a remarkable woman you are. Strong enough to stand up for what's right, kind enough to care for children not your own, and brave enough to start anew when everything was taken from you. I find myself falling in love with you more each day, and I'd be honored if you'd consider becoming my wife. Tears sprang to Zara's eyes, happy ones that blurred her vision of the earnest man kneeling before her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll be your wife. Isaac's answering smile was radiant as he rose, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. His lips found hers in a kiss that started gentle, but quickly deepened with months of unspoken longing. Zara melted against him, her arms winding around his neck as the creek bubbled around their ankles. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaac pressed his forehead to hers. When I paid your bail that day, I never imagined I was finding the love of my life. Zara laughed softly. And when I was locked in that cell for Defiance, I never imagined a handsome cowboy would pay my bail and change my life forever. News of their engagement spread quickly through Whispering Pine Ranch and into Dodge City. With Mayor Simmons now under investigation and public opinion firmly in Zara's favor, the town welcomed her back with open arms. She resumed her position at the schoolhouse in September, riding into town each morning and returning to the ranch and to Isaac each evening. They were married on a crisp October day beneath the cottonwood trees near Zara's cabin, surrounded by ranch hands, their families, and even Sheriff Thompson, who had brought a wedding gift and news that Mayor Simmons had been formally charged with embezzlement. Justice comes in its own time, the sheriff had said, tipping his hat to the bride. Zara had smiled, her hand securely in Isaac's. So does love, she'd replied. Their first year of marriage brought challenges, a harsh winter that threatened the cattle, disputes over water rights with a neighboring ranch, and the adjustment of two independent people learning to build a life together. But it also brought deep joy as they transformed the main house into a true home, filled with books and music and laughter. By their first anniversary, Whispering Pine Ranch had become known for both its fine cattle and its community spirit. Zara continued teaching in town, but also hosted reading circles for adults on the ranch, helping several of Isaac's hands learn to read and write. Isaac expanded the ranch's operations, breeding horses as well as cattle, and earning a reputation for fair dealing throughout the county. On a warm spring evening, almost 2 years after Isaac had first walked into the Dodge City jailhouse, they sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson. I have news, Zara said, her voice soft but excited. News that might require some changes to our arrangements. Isaac turned to her, one eyebrow raised in question. Zara took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. By winter, there will be 3 of us living in this house. For a moment, Isaac stared at her in stunned silence. Then, with a whoop of joy that startled the horses in the nearby corral, he swept her into his arms, spinning her in circles until they were both dizzy with laughter. "A baby," he whispered when he finally set her down, his voice reverent. "Our baby." Zara nodded, tears of happiness shimmering in her eyes. "Our baby." Isaac knelt before her, much as he had by the creek when he'd proposed, and pressed a gentle kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "You don't know it yet, but you have the most extraordinary mother in all of Kansas territory. She stood up to a corrupt mayor, taught children who had no teacher, and made a lonely rancher the happiest man alive." Zara ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "And the most wonderful father," she added. "A man brave enough to free a defiant woman from jail and wise enough to see beyond her circumstances to who she truly was." Isaac stood, gathering her close in the deepening twilight. "I thank God every day that I was in town to hear your speech that Founder's Day," he said. "That I had the means to pay your bail and the courage to offer you a place to stay. And I thank God I was stubborn enough to speak out against Simmons," Zara replied with a smile. "Otherwise, we might never have met." "Oh, I think we would have," Isaac said confidently. "Some things are just meant to be, Zara Zimmerman, and you and I, we were written in the stars long before we ever set eyes on each other." As night fell over Whispering Pine Ranch, Zara stood in her husband's embrace, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From a jail cell in Dodge City to a prosperous ranch, from strangers to lovers to parents-to-be, their story had unfolded in ways neither could have predicted. Yet somehow, it felt inevitable, as though every hardship and triumph had been leading them to this moment, to this life they'd built together. A life born from an act of defiance and an offer of freedom that had become so much more than either of them had ever dared to dream.